in time now where rights are actually going backwards, they're being regressed. I had to speak to my supervisor, my prospective supervisor, and say, look, I'm concerned.
That's the big problem. I say that's the big one.
The fact that we are an 84% male sector.
Yes.
And men don't talk about the problems, you know? And it just jarred with me, the thought of deciding to do something that would mean I'd have to cover, to mask, to hide, to retract back a bit. Statistically, suicide is the biggest killer in engineering than any other sector.
I know that to be the case. It's absolutely shocking.
We're only currently 16.5% women in engineering, whereas there's 51% women in the population. So that's a big gap, a big delta.
Do you think there's more change to be made, or are we there yet?
Oh my goodness.
Mark, so what you've achieved with EqualEngineers is truly phenomenal.
Thank you so much, I appreciate that.
You're welcome. What led you to that pivotal moment to found the organisation?
Well, it started back when I was, I set up my first organisation, not-for-profit, called InterEngineering, to connect, inform and empower LGBTQ plus engineers and supporters. And I set that up whilst working in industry as I was becoming a chartered engineer, because I just saw a need for an organisation that would apply equal focus to provide a focus on sexual orientation and gender identity in engineering. And we had some impact with that, and that's still going well and what have you, and I still oversee it. But in 2017, I saw that the focus on a single strand identity wasn't enough for me. It wasn't satiating me enough. And I saw an opportunity to broaden out and create a brand that would apply equal focus to each strand of diversity, hence the idea for EqualEngineers. To be honest, my husband and I were on holiday in Thailand. I was thinking about setting up a business, and then I discovered that EqualEngineers was available on Companies House, on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn.
That makes sense to me, actually.
Like, register, and then I had the idea for the company. And I have very good relationships with Rolls-Royce, and they approached me at the time asking if I would run a event specifically for students from underrepresented groups in engineering. And I said, absolutely, provided you provide the funding. So I had this great idea come about where if I had this events portfolio and a jobs board, where the events portfolio would then feed talent to the jobs board, we'd then start building up this system of talent that in-house recruiters could have access to try and overcome the sort of biases that can crop up in the recruitment process that's leading to minoritized groups not necessarily making it through to opportunities. So that's how the idea of the business started out. It was to be an events platform with an associated jobs board, and it's evolved since then, all the work that we've done.
Oh, that's brilliant, thank you. And very much talking my language, so that's good. I'm so pleased we're having this conversation. And what led you to go and take action?
What led me to go and take action? I think it was from a point of frustration. Like I'm a bit of a force majeure, I've come to realise, you know, and when I see inequity or when I see a lack of justice, I want to go out of my way to solve it, to, as the French say, ameliorate the situation, to make it better. So that's why I needed my own business to achieve that, because you're shackled, quite frankly, if you're in an employer that isn't taking it seriously or isn't committing funding to it or isn't aligning their values with your values, you know, whatever. And so I really saw founding my own business as a way to just be at the steering wheel of creating an entity that could create social change, essentially, in an industry that needs it a lot.
A lot for sure. And you're an engineer.
I am, yes I am.
And do you feel that you've experienced that then?
So I'm a gay man, and looking backwards now, looking back in my career, I've had to do some soul searching, actually, thinking back when I've experienced moments of inequality. And in the whole, in the main, I don't think I've experienced anything overt. But there has been moments in my career where that aspect of my identity, my sexual orientation, there's been a clear intersection with a decision that I've made. And one of the things that there are sort of two key moments. One was when I was 17, young gay man, gay boy really, growing up in Edinburgh. And, you know, this was 2003, 2004, 2005. And very different times from how we've evolved in the last 17 years on same-sex rights. And I wanted to move to London. So I made the conscious decision to apply to Imperial College London to study chemical engineering because it was London, because it had a big gay scene and you know, I'd be able to spread my wings a bit more and move away from where I was born. The next juncture was studying for my PhD. So I applied to 4 different places. I had offers from Nottingham, Edinburgh, Cambridge, and Imperial.
Oh wow!
And my opportunity at Imperial was funded by the Qatar Carbonates and Carbon Storage Research Centre. So that was the name of where I was studying, the QCCSRC. But it was funded by Qatar Petroleum, a national oil company. And you know, being gay in Qatar, well, it's not really allowed, you know. Equalities legislation doesn't exactly apply there. So here was me, young, 21, faced with all these opportunities and really wanted to take this opportunity because it was well funded. It was the start of a 10-year new research program, $75 million across 10 years by Qatar Petroleum and Shell. But I had to speak to my supervisor, my prospective supervisor, and say, look, I'm concerned. You know, am I going to have to spend a lot of time in the Middle East? Is that going to be part of a funding requirement? Because
it's sad, isn't it, actually?
I had just got engaged to my boyfriend, now husband at the time. And it just jarred with me the thought of deciding to do something that would mean I'd have to cover, to mask, to hide, to retract back a bit.
And what you're proud of, actually.
And what I'm proud of. But... you know, my supervisor said, absolutely do not worry about it. Your contract will be with Imperial College. If you don't feel comfortable going over there, don't worry about it. You know, there will be no requirement for you to do so if you don't feel safe. Now, I had to come out. They already knew I was gay, but imagine I was in the closet and I had this concern, or I didn't have the privilege of already being a student at the university with an existing relationship with my prospective supervisor. Imagine I'd been an external applicant. This is just an example of where stacked privilege comes in terms of access to information, the ability to share things, comfort levels. That was a privileged position to be able to show that vulnerability. But you also shouldn't have to share that concern.
That's what I was just thinking. I always think, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I always think when I hear people say, you know, I have to come out, and why? Who else's business is it to come out or to not? Do you know what I mean? Why is that?
Well, you know,
that might be a naive viewpoint.
Well, we live in a heteronormative society, full stop. So where you see someone, you do automatically assume the gender of their other half, if they're wearing a ring, for example, is the opposite sex. I'm guilty of it. I still do it. I met someone at the weekend, or at a networking event a few weeks ago, who's a female, who's a woman, came up to my InterEngineering stall, was chatting to me, and, you know, shared that she has a female partner, or she's a lesbian. And here's me thinking, when she's saying the word partner, imagining a husband at home somewhere, you know. So we're all guilty of it. I've got 2 kids, and when you're traveling through an airport, especially, that can be challenging. There was this moment once where I was at a large airport in London, was traveling through security. My husband was over with taking the buggy through the scanner with my 2 kids. I was still getting all the stuff out the bags on the conveyor belt, and the security advisor just looked at the kids and said, "Oh, where's mum?" And my husband didn't know what to do. He was like, oh, my partner's over there, my partner's over there, and then hurried me over. But you could tell in the security guard's face that they were like, oh, and this is an airport that's really, really big on equality, you know.
Yeah.
So it shows you those micro impacts that can happen. And I'm not saying that from a position of me personally.
Yeah.
It's more I'm trying to raise my kids in an environment where having two dads is just as valid as having a mum and a dad, or only a mum, or living with your grandparents, etc., etc., etc. But to get that constant reinforcement of there is something lacking in your existence, whereas mum really, really lights the fire inside me.
I can see it actually. I can see the passion.
It's that gap in understanding, that not bridging that gap to just be more inclusive in your language and saying something that's neutral that then doesn't, you know, run the risk of causing offence or saying the wrong thing. So I think that is where if I ever feel like I'm feeling a bit lost from why I'm doing what I'm doing, I always bring it back to those moments when it centres on something that is me, and then think, I am white, I am male, I am cisgendered, I am able-bodied. I've got all the privileges going aside from the fact that I'm gay. So where can I then firstly understand how other groups feel where they're in less privileged positions, and then be an advocate for change?
Yeah, brilliant answer. Yeah, brilliant. And I think that leads us really nicely on actually to understanding what do you see as the landscape at the moment, more within engineering and tech industries, technical industries, and do you think there's more change to be made, or are we there yet?
Oh my goodness, we're so far from being anywhere that it's still a speck on the horizon here in Birmingham.
It's not allowed. I don't know why I'm even allowed. It's not. I just knew that was going to be your response.
Where I think if you take it strand by strand, we're at different points on the journey. I think the big focus, as it's always been, has been getting more women into engineering, into tech, because we're only currently 16.5% women in engineering, whereas there's 51% women in the population. So that's a big gap, a big delta, until we're representative of wider society.
Absolutely.
I see a movement happening in ethnicity. So again, two sides of diversity that you can see more so than other hidden identities like sexual orientation or disability status. Now one could argue on gender, you know, that is actually a hidden construct. You can't always see that. But generally that is the focus of where a lot of companies are going. And I respect companies that take an inclusive approach to how they're doing ED&I. It's a bugbear of mine when I meet a new client and they're doing women this month and next year they're focusing in on ethnicity, for example. They sort of treat people as if they're one identity and then one identity, whereas actually if you were just inclusive, recognizing that you're maybe not doing so well on inclusion, but use inclusion as your driving force and then having different levels of intervention for different strands of diversity, that is a more inclusive approach. And it aligns with the strategy for EqualEngineers. So, you know, we're more likely to be a provider to them.
Good. But I think you're absolutely right. I see it all the time. There is just this focus on gender, this focus on ethnicity, which we're so passionate about, and I think we all should be as well. But there absolutely are other areas of minority as well that need to be brought to the forefront. You know,
well, I think it's people in particular in ethnic minority backgrounds always feeling like they're repressed, or the conversation around them is always like they're asking for more, like they're asking for what am I trying to say? I want to say the right thing here. At Pride at the weekend, it was all about a celebration of identity. And someone who was at the parade that weekend marching with us, who is ethnic minority, a black woman, said, I don't really feel like this with my community when I talk about my ethnicity. It's always negative. It's always, you know, what are we repressed for? What are we lacking? The fight for justice, you know. So I feel like when an organisation only focuses on the not the dividend that diversity brings, but the deficit that a group has. It's a very different energy. Yeah. So I think we need to, if we are talking about ethnicity or gender or sexual orientation, we need to remember that when we're talking about the individuals in those groups, they also have an ethnicity, a gender, a sexual orientation. We're all, I always say in my training, you know, we are 7.5, probably 8 billion people on this planet by now. And every single person has been on a different journey to get to where they're at in life. So we have innately 8 billion different perspectives. Everyone is different. Everyone's got a different story to tell. But when we restrict it to stories that are based only on our demographic identities, then are we really mining and harvesting the plethora of opportunity that's out there, sources for inspiration, adversity that's been overcome?
Beautiful,
Are we really getting everything that we can get out of people?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree on this point in two ways, actually. I always think there's a place for, so I'm going to take it to a whole different place. I think about my daughters, and I think about if they need to be disciplined in some way, so they've done something that I wouldn't agree with, for example. What's the best way for me to go about that? And I really feel it's through positive reinforcement.
Yes.
I really do. I always get the best results, the best feedback, the best engagement from them. They feel good on the back of that.
Interesting.
And on a different kind of, I guess, scope to this, I went and I was watching Aquila speak. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but watching Aquila speak, and he was talking about basically about your own history, because we repeat our same cycles, don't we? We can do, there's a comfortability in doing so, and then we can repeat what our ancestors have maybe said to us, or higher generations have said to us, older generations. And he was talking about our heritage, and he was said, and I thought it was a beautiful point, maybe rather than focusing on perhaps some of the negative things that have happened in previous history, let's look at the rich heritage that actually we come from, or he comes from, or whatever minority you are comes from, and really focusing on that. And in doing so, that's so empowering. Because it's to say, like my dad, he always talks about he's on the border, India, Pakistani, he'll tell me off, but we're on the border, and he talks about, we come from the Moguls. So I would just think, which is like the kings and the queens basically of India. So I always think when we talk about, no, but we probably don't, let's be honest, but everyone does, but I always say when I'm speaking to my daughters, but we come from the, and there's a richness with that, rather than focusing on the fact he was an immigrant and he came and he had nothing and he's built up a business and he's had to do that very difficultly, and it's
focusing on your history. No, it's very important.
That was a roundabout point, but
it's really important to celebrate your history, to remember those that have come before you and progress that they achieved through the advocacy work that they do, and also like what can you now do? What can I now do? Taking the baton to then ensure that we don't go backwards on any progress that's been made, but we can also move forwards to achieving even greater equity for everyone. And it's different having legislative equality than it is for having societal equality. We might have legislative equality on certain elements of LGBT, but it's not until that feeds through to wider society that it can have real impact. And actually we're at a point in time now where rights are actually going backwards, they're being regressed, or the government that's in power right now are not taking things forward that had been said they would take things forward previously. The Gender Recognition Act, for example, and updating it. So, it's a pendulum swing, pendulum swing equality. When you swing too far forward in one direction, the majority group feel like they're having to cede too much ground in order for minorities to advance. Therefore, there's a bit of pushback. And then the pendulum swings back. The key is to keep that resistance so that you move forward and you don't swing too far back from where your original starting point was.
Very interesting. So, okay, on that basis then, how would you say employers are best to support LGBT plus in the workplace? It can feel like, and I feel like this myself, am I going to say the wrong thing? And not just with lots of different communities, is it right? How would you best suggest that employers, people in general, I don't know, clients, approach the topic of LGBT plus within the workplace?
It's about, so that sentiment that you just described, I describe it as the fear of walking on eggshells. And in general, that feeling you just identified within yourself is the way that everyone feels about identities which they're not.
Yes, so true. So true.
So, and that's what allyship is. Allyship, there's a spectrum of allyship that goes from apathy all the way through to advocacy. So apathy, awareness, advocacy. And it's about taking that first step, moving from apathy, where you don't know anything about a particular group's issues or barriers, to one where you then have a conscious awareness.
Yeah.
And the way that you get a conscious awareness is asking people, showing positive intent, thawing yourself from that frozen state and feeling shackled from the fear of offending, and actually stepping into the light, asking questions, watching TED Talks from role models in that area, reading books around topics that we're seeing highlighted through social liberation movements, so that you start getting a better tapestry of what that group goes through or what that group has to endure. And it's that learning process that will then challenge the accumulated biases that you've grown up with. The stereotypes that you might have inherited from your parents, or from what was said in the playground at school, or from workplace chatter, or from how groups are portrayed in the media. The more we can root everyone in the lived experience of others, that's how we're going to build a stronger profession. So specifically then for LGBTQ+, it's around creating that dialogue, creating that conversation, you know. You have to start somewhere. So for an organisation, it could be as simple as doing a lunch and learn, or getting a guest speaker to come in to talk about a subject, and then just seeing what response that has from the organisation.
Yeah.
Because with hidden identities, what more often than not, what ends up happening is you get this curve of pushback and people not really understanding why it's necessary, but there'll be the odd person that now has the courage to step up, to speak out, and you might then start, it's like lifting the lid on your internal culture. You'll start building a culture of trust where people feel like they don't have to cover, to mask, to hide who they really are, and they'll start to either come out about their sexual orientation in the workplace, they'll start using the true pronouns that describe the gender of their partner in the workplace, they'll start being open about their true gender identity, whether or not they're looking to transition gender, you know, at a point in life. But all these things take for creating a safe workplace environment where people feel like they can open up. And that's where in engineering, we've got a huge opportunity between physical safety and all the work that both of our respective clients do on creating a physically safe culture, to also creating a psychologically safe culture where people can be open about anything going on in their mind. Because it's my sort of point of advocacy, my mantra is that if you're not creating a psychologically safe workplace environment, how sure are you that your workers, your employees are fully there and present and concentrating on the job in hand? There's a lot of high-risk tasks, high-risk activities that happen in engineering and technology, and we want our workers to be fully present and not distracted by things going on in their mind. So by creating a psychologically safe working environment where the culture of the workplace is, look, we're here, we're ready for you, be open about anything going on in your life. And that is the same for the white, cisgendered, heterosexual, able-bodied male engineer that might be going through bereavement, trauma, abuse,
look
addiction.
At the suicide rates.
Suicide, precisely.
So scary.
Precisely.
So scary.
That was something I wanted to bring up around masculinity in engineering. You know, statistically, suicide is the biggest killer in engineering than any other sector.
I mean, is that shocking?
It's huge.
I know that to be the case. It's absolutely shocking.
2017 Office of National Statistics data, death by suicide was the highest killer in engineering, in the construction, manufacturing and the process industries. 500 odd employees took their own life. That's more than 2 a day, roughly.
Yeah.
You know.
And I have to say, firsthand, I've had some clients affected very badly by that.
That doesn't surprise me.
Where it happens, and it has happened. And they've put, I have to say, a couple of my clients have put the most phenomenal initiatives into place, and they've taken mental health very seriously. And I know we've gone down a slightly different route, but it's all around that safety, that psychological safety piece that you're talking about for everybody.
Absolutely, but we're not doing enough. Because until there's parity of esteem between mental health and physical health, then that's when we'll start to see the movement. It shouldn't take for a suicide to happen on your site or in your organisation for you to enact mental health first aid training. There's a mandatory requirement through the Health and Safety Executive of the ratio of physical first aiders that you have to have on a construction site, you know, depending on the number of people that you have, the density of people within certain areas, etc. There's absolutely nothing that you have to do on mental health and well-being. But we all know that if so, you know, and how comfortable do people feel if someone's physically at risk or they've injured their leg? We all agree that responding and giving immediate action is necessary. It's warranted. You bandage them up, or you get them comfortable, and you call for help. You know, you call an ambulance, call 999. But if someone's having a breakdown or using suicidal language, suicidal ideation, do you know what to do?
No.
Not a lot of people would.
Not a lot of people do.
And often people might just pass it by or just walk on. And actually, if that intervention was done earlier, you might stop certain actions, the individual going on to do certain actions, you know. So I think it's incumbent upon, especially our sector, given that we've got these statistics at the core, that we should be aspiring for creating equality between physical safety and psychological safety, and training as many people up as possible in mental health first aid. MHFA, Mental Health First Aid England, they have a target to train up 1 in 10 of the adult UK population in basic mental health first aid, so that you then have the toolkit to call upon in real time, that if you see something happening, you've got the confidence to intervene. Just like
just
we
like
do
you would
with
with health and safety.
ABC, airway, breathing, circulation. Just
Yeah.
like you would with health and safety, with physical
First aid.
safety. First aid, exactly. So they're only at 1 in 60 just now, though, I think, MHFE England, in terms of a statistic. So we could do a lot more as a sector to help shift that.
Yeah. So what do you, I mean, we're digressing slightly, but I think it's really interesting. Why is why are our sectors that we work within, you know, engineering, manufacturing in particular, why are the suicide rates so high from your perspective? I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
I think it's to do with, I think it's a combination of things. I think for workers that work on site, there's long periods of time away from home. The pay is not great in certain, you know, lines of the workforce. So the margins are very, very small. And you've got unhealthy coping mechanisms that then get resorted to when people are not happy or when they're depressed. So alcoholism, smoking, you know, not looking after yourself. And not talking about your problems. And I think that's the biggest problem.
I say that's
the fact that we are an 84% male sector. And men don't talk about the problems. You know, men aren't known for opening up, being vulnerable, sharing how they really feel. And you know, I've been on sites. I've been in workplace cultures where individually there'll be guys that do wear their heart on the sleeve, that will open up. But then when they collectively get together, it's like this school culture again, being back in the playground, this sort of hyper-masculinity that can be so pervasive. And it's that dominant culture that isn't actually serving any benefit to the individuals within it, but also to the minoritized groups that are outside of it. You know, so I think we sort of need to dismantle that, break that apart. And that's mainly some of the work that we do. We are training. So in terms of, like, to your first question around EqualEngineers and setting it up, yes, I set it up to create a focus on each strand of diversity. But about 2 or 3 years ago, that's when I changed tact and thought we need to focus in on engaging the majority And so more of our work now is delivering to male majority teams.
And was this when you did the research around the EqualEngineering report, engineer reports?
Yeah. So when we
Very
did,
interesting.
So in terms of the order of events, I was at a leadership panel for the Women in Construction Engineering Awards in 2018. 350 women in the room, top of their game, you know, all being judged on for the awards, and they had these parallel panel sessions just to keep people entertained, essentially.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the usual, you know, why do we still have an issue with gender equality?
Yeah.
How do we get more men engaged on women's equality in the workplace? Blah blah blah. And I just thought to myself, I got the microphone and I thought, I'm going to be controversial here.
Nice.
I'm going to suggest, why don't we put the spotlight on men? Why don't we ask them why? Now, I thought I was going to get this pushback, people in the room saying, how dare you suggest that, Mark? So I did it. So I suggested it.
Because it's action. This is
but
why.
But what validated my action was that women in the room started opening up about how gender inequality had led them and their husbands to make certain decisions around who earns more. You know, the husband was earning more. So when they had a family, he had to go back to work rather than doing. So this sort of structural inequality sort of led me to think there's something here where we need to get more men in the conversation.
We do.
And that is when I discovered the male suicide rates from the ONS at a national level. And I didn't believe them. So
it's unbelievable. It is unbelievable.
I wanted to do my own research. So we did the Masculinity in Engineering survey for the first time in 2018.
Yeah.
That's when we got 1 in 5 engineers reporting losing a work colleague to suicide, and also 1 in 5 reporting suicidal ideation or self-harm.
That's given me chills, actually.
And we did a refresh of the survey last year, so post-pandemic.
Yeah.
We haven't published this data yet. It's coming soon. But that number's gone up to 1 in 4.
Oh, it hasn't.
1 in 4.
Really?
Yeah. So now 25%.
There's a huge amount to be done.
Huge. It's not shifted. If anything, it's been exacerbated and gotten worse by the fact that we've had the pandemic. So I don't know. I don't know what the solution is in terms of how we all come together to address it. But there is some good hope. There is some good positive news. There was a recent, I don't know if you saw it on LinkedIn and Twitter, something went viral. It was an article in the Daily Mail mocking construction builders now becoming woke and no longer having their builder's breakfast, and they're all opening up and talking about their feelings.
Good.
It was actually a bit of a sensationalist title, because actually the content of the article was better, in the sense that isn't that a positive movement if now
to grab some attention.
the concept of what we think of as a stereotypical builder, overweight, cigarette out the mouth, whatever, actually people are being more mindful of their health. They are talking more about their feelings. I hope everything that was in that survey that was done, which I think was about 2,000 people that had taken part in that SNAP survey, I hope that is the direction of travel for the sector. I really do.
No, I hope so too. And I think with businesses like yours, businesses like mine, many others that are real advocates for change and making really positive change, I believe there will continue to be. We just need to exacerbate that change. And be in rooms where we're banging the drum and we're talking about these things to people that maybe aren't talking about these things. Yeah. You've been phenomenal.
Thank you.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark, we are going to jump into our lightning round.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Like a game show.
It's a game show.
Got my buzzer. Catchphrase.
What do you do for fun?
I enjoy going to posh hotels with my husband and drinking nice wine.
That sounds lovely. That does sound like fun.
It's a very nice thing to do.
What does equality mean to you?
Equality to me means everyone having the opportunity to achieve their potential. They say that talent is equally distributed everywhere, but opportunity is not. So equality and equity to me is helping people find that for themselves.
What would you say to your younger self?
I would say to my younger self, don't get too fixated on having to go the most obvious, direct career progression route.
Yes.
Take time, experiment a bit more in entrepreneurialism. You don't have to go from school to uni to PhD to graduate role to you know, whatever, just take some time to you know, relax a bit and be more free flowing.
Who inspires you?
So big source of inspiration for me is Annie Lennox. I love her. She's one of my favourite singers. She had the you know, the confidence to be herself in the 80s, you know, going against the norms of what was happening then. And in her later years now, she is an advocate for women's rights. She advocates for you know, women's AIDS treatment in Africa through her Sing Foundation. So I always people who align their core values and what they stand for with the work that they do.
Beautiful. And what makes an exceptional leader?
An exceptional leader is someone who leads from a position of empathy, so they can truly walk in the shoes of the people that they're leading. So it's servant leadership is a concept, like
Such
really
a fan of that.
leading for the benefit of others and not being so enclosed within the cage of how you're going to be perceived. You know, being able to have that courage, to be vulnerable, to say when you don't understand something, to have that conscious curiosity, to find out more, positive intent. That to me is a strong leader.
Fabulous. What does sustainability mean to you?
Sustainability to me means being able to do the most with what you've already got, and that doesn't just mean environmentally or financially, it means ethically as well. So what is it that you're doing that aligns between your values and those that you want your organisation to have and the benefit that it brings to the world?
And finally, tell us an inspirational quote or word.
Be the change you want to see in the world. I know it's overused, but I love that because I hope I'm role modelling that for my kids and inspiring others to do the same.
Exceptional. Exceptional, Mark. Thank you so much. You've been brilliant.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
And be the change you want to see is absolutely mine. And we hear it all the time. It is so important.
It is. No, it is. It is totally.